All right, we're on there. Good evening, everybody. What a pleasure it is to host you tonight at the Foster Auditorium here. We have just concluded a 3-day workshop on Jews in the Middle East from 1800 to the present, and we couldn't find a better fit to end this workshop rather than with Professor Hanan Hammad that I'll introduce in a second. I want to give a few shout-outs of thanks. First of all, I would like to have a big round of applause to Elizabeth Seres here, who worked really tirelessly for the success of this workshop. Thank you so much. I want to thank my co-organizers, Michelle Campos, Orit Bashkin, Menashe Anzi, and Orit Waknin-Yakutieli. The Humanities Institute for supporting this project from the very, very beginning. The History Department, the Program of Jewish Studies, Dean Lang, the Pascarilla Center, and the Penn State Libraries. And our outside partners, the Center of Middle Eastern Studies in Chicago, in the University of Chicago, and our dear partner, the Herzog Center at Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce my, what is called in the academic jargon, my academic sister. We studied under the same advisor and pretty much overlapped the dissertation committee. So Hanan Hammad is a social and cultural historian of modern Egypt, whose work focuses on gender, sexuality, working classes, and popular culture. She is the author of many academic publications, most notably the award-winning Industrial Sexuality, Gender, Urbanization, and Social Transformation in Egypt, came out with UT Press in 2016 and won many awards. And the work that we celebrate today, Layla Murad, Unknown Past, Layla Murad, the Jewish Muslim star of Egypt, that just came out 2 weeks ago with Stanford University Press. Professor Hammad won prizes from the National Women's Studies Association, the Association of Middle East Women's Studies, MESA, the Arab American Book Award, and Journal of Social History. Hammad is Professor of History and the Director of Middle East Studies at Texas Christian University. Please join me in welcoming Hanan Hammad to Penn State.
Thank you, Lior. Thank you so much. Of course, it's true. We are academic brothers, and our work was conceived by almost the same committee. But actually, he did much better. He succeeded to do Iran, while actually, once Iranians turned me down, I turned it into Egypt. Thank you all for coming and hosting me in your actually important and brave work. Really appreciate it. And giving me a chance to do what I most of my life, actually, academic and personal life, liked to do, which is talk about Layla Murad. I'm very worried that people will fed up. And actually now, after the book, I don't really know what to do with myself. Our talk today draws on that book. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with Layla Murad. But allow me to kind of sort of introduce a little part of what I like Layla Murad. She's not going to leave us.
Try to. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Okay. No matter what Layla Murad does to me, I just love her. So, she was saying in that clip, I have no hope in life but to see you happy. And I always feel actually this is how she whispered to too many people, and she succeeded actually to make many people happy, including myself. So to talk about Layla Murad a little bit, she was born most probably 1918 and passed away in 1995. She started her career actually as a young teen. To give a brief account of her early age, she was born in an urban middle-class Jewish family. Her father, Zaki Effendi Murad, was a well-known singer. His career actually flourished in the nationalist ethos of 1919 revolution. And like many other performers of the time, he came to the Americas for a tour to entertain the Hispanic Arab communities. He did initially well, that was in the late 1920s, but for his bad luck, the Great Depression hit very hard. He came home penniless. The entertainment landscape completely changed in Egypt, and he invested all his energy to train his talented teenage daughter, Layla Murad. He mobilized all his experiences and networks to train Layla before he introduced her to the Cairo musical scene 1932 as a 14-year-old girl. She did very well, but we have to remember actually Layla Murad's career, which makes her a window to look at the broader history of modern Egypt, coincided with many different technical and changes in the entertainment industry that contributed to her success. First of all, microphone. That was the beginning of introducing microphone into public concerts. And microphone actually helped her to amplify the beauty of her soft voice, which brought an end to some vocalists who relied mostly on the strength of their voice. She also was the first generation of vocalists to be heard from Alexandria to Aswan through the national broadcast. Radio in Egypt started as private enterprises. And in 1934, the government decided to organize the chaotic scene of the air. So they very much banned all the private radios and started the national broadcast. And Layla Murad was contracted to produce or to offer a concert on a weekly basis. This is a time also of the flourishing celebrity and gossip publications, so that relate heavily on pictures and images. So Layla Murad belonged to that generation of respectable, nationally known artists whose image and voice would be recognized throughout Egypt and beyond throughout the Arab world. A third and more important technical innovation that helped to make Layla Murad as we experienced her life throughout 20th century was the sound cinema. I would say sound cinema arrived in Egypt singing. The second sound movie was actually sound with musical. And this encouraged entertainers of the time to do musical to satisfy this public demand on such pictures. And arguably, the most important composer and singer of the time, Muhammad Abdul Wahab, was attracted to make cinema pictures. And in every movie, he would introduce a female singer. 1927, Zaki Murad's connections paid off very well by convincing his old friend Muhammad Abdul Wahab to actually choose his daughter Layla Murad to star the movie Yahya al-Hub, Viva Love. The movie was a huge success. It introduced Layla as a star who's up to Muhammad Abdul Wahab's work. Muhammad Abdul Wahab himself actually, I don't want to say adopted her, but definitely opened the doors for her to make her not only a star, but a mega star who plays only in exclusive private parties. For example, she would sing in the wedding party of Makram Abed's cousin at the time. Makram Abed was the prime minister. However, the experience was not actually all success. It was a painful experience considering the filmmaker, Muhammad Karim, who directed all Muhammad Abdul Wahab's movies. Muhammad Karim was known as, until today actually, as a pioneer filmmaker, the most important filmmaker in Egyptian history. I disagree. The guy was misogynist. And again, considering my own interest and training as a gender scholar, I see him almost in toxic masculine by our today's language. He was misogynist. He was Gharbizadeh, or West-Straken. He loved everything European or Western. He criticized everything about women. And he subjected almost all his female stars into a severe diet to make them look European. Play down all the curvy tone on the Egyptian female body. And actually this brought Layla Murad to the verge of fainting. She was fainting in studio. And he was not even convinced that she's a good actress, although he would acknowledge that she had a beautiful voice. And she was polite. This is how he said. With the success, Layla Murad actually would become her own agent, sidelined her father. And she would negotiate for herself. Muhammad Karim, who was not even convinced that Layla Murad is worth that much, he refused to make, or the negotiation to make a second film, failed. And the image moved. The image moved. Yeah. Good. So Layla Murad, actually, her talent was highly noticed by Togo Mizrahi, the Egyptian Jewish filmmaker, and one of the most important, not only filmmakers, but in the cinema industrialists in Egyptian history. And if you haven't done so, please check out my best friend and partner, academic partner, Deborah Stars, about Togo Mizrahi. Fantastic, fantastic work. Togo Mizrahi, actually, from the second film for Layla Murad, they worked together in 5 films. He formulated Layla Murad as a brand. Layla, that's it. The persona in the movie will be Layla, and the name Layla will be part of the movie title, if not all the film title. So Layla became really brand, and she would keep negotiating with him to double down her payment in a way that seemed to be exuberant. But he, as a successful cinema industrialist, appreciated the talent he was working with. And he made her the center almost on every scene for every film he worked with her. He carefully chose the male co-stars that Layla Murad would learn from their experience and would shine over them. So Yusuf Wahbi was the first co-star with Layla in Togo Mizrahi's film, and then the rising star Hussein Sidqi. And both of them actually would work later with Layla in other movies as co-stars, producers, and filmmakers. But definitely, no other filmmakers would reformulate Layla Murad and reintroduce her to on the screen as much as Anwar Wagdi did after Mizrahi. Anwar Wagdi was already a star in his own merit. He worked with Layla Murad in few films, including some production of Togo Mizrahi. He starred in many films, but he always missed the chance to be the lead, to cast the leading role with Layla. And it seems like he always wanted to. So 1945, when he wanted to introduce himself actually as a film producer, he hired Layla to co-star for him. She agreed, and he accepted her what seemed to be exuberant payment at the time. Before the end, or before we move to her life with Anwar Wagdi, we have to emphasize that Layla Murad worked with many producers, many filmmakers. They are all men. And interestingly, when analyzed these movies, very much she was accepting Ridley to be the image and the voice for some of the most patriarchal values in the society. Those men actually, in one way or another, they repeated the themes about how to contain women's uncanny sexuality, sexual purity of women as a key for keeping honor of the society and the family and the nation, how to emphasize the importance of the position, the traditional position of women in the family as housemakers, and to do that, she has to sacrifice her talents, her independence, and keep serving her husbands. And she did that readily, while actually in her own private life and professional life, she was a tough negotiator. She used all her agencies to increase her payment. She negotiated how she appeared on the screen, and she was actually the breadwinner of her own family. So while her father was still around and she had male brothers, male, she was the breadwinner and somehow actually was almost the head of the family. So on her private life and in her own negotiation for her work, she was completely independent woman as we aspire to. But on the screen, she was that submissive girl who's willing to kiss the feet of the man who would save her sexual honor. And the case of Layla Murad, actually, in that sense, is almost universal. You find that female stars at the time, this is very much what they are doing. Layla Murad and Anwar Wagdi got married before they released their first film together, Layla Bint al-Fuqara. Actually, while they are shooting for Layla Bint al-Fuqara, the filmmaker passed away. So this is how Anwar Wagdi stepped up to be the director. So he became a director, filmmaker, and a star. And Layla Murad's husband, which actually kind of sort of irritated him quite bad. He would always complain that people would mention my name without saying, I'm Layla Murad's husband. Interestingly, while they were shooting the movie, there were rumors about this kind of sort of infatuation growing between the couple, but they insisted that no, nothing happened. Particularly Layla, when the press actually confronted her, she said, please be careful, I don't welcome this reckless coverage. She was lying because she already signed the marriage contract. They became a couple, and there are so many things actually here that I was trying to do out of this, their life together. It's a marriage like any other modern house. You can find or expect all these domestic disagreements between couples over jealousy, wife's position in the family, work, etc. But this marriage also was exceptional. It was an interfaith marriage, and it's a marriage of celebrity couple. So when it comes to their life together as a celebrity couple, they were very much keen to invite the press into their life. They were not resisting it. So the press also was keen to report all these scandals to sell copies. For Layla Murad and Anwar Wagdi, using also the press to sell tickets, keep and feed the public interest in their private lives, to the extent that also they started to use the press against one another. And they turned their marriage, this is one of the arguments I'm making, into actually a public discourse about the modern family. Both of them used every tool in the patriarchal playbook to make a case against one another. Anwar Wagdi would say, she doesn't want to give me a son or a child because she cares about her career. And she would say, but I need money, so I need to work with other producers and I need to work much. So the financial disagreement actually dominated a big part of the coverage on their, in the press. The other part of it is this interfaith marriage, which is sort of unusual in modern Egypt, as like in many communities. How much actually the religion differences played for making the decision about the marriage, or how her family responded to that differences, there is not much evidence that there was a strong disagreement towards this. We have to remember that Layla actually was the breadwinner of the family. So the idea that her father, who was was very much embracing his Jewishness, had to accept. We don't have evidence that he disagreed, but he had to accept. Also, Anwar Wagdi's likable personality, his business that was picking up very well and giving jobs to her siblings, could have contributed to his acceptance in the family. But more importantly, for me, okay, before we talk about that dark side of marriage, we talk about their professional success together. They worked together in 8 movies. Anwar Wagdi produced and directed 8, 7 out of the 8. And to see how generous and highly generous production and highly talented Anwar Wagdi, we might take a look to some of the songs that included in these films. Incredibly generous production and highly artistic. And here Anwar Wagdi was deliberately actually inviting working classes who afforded the ticket of the cinema to watch what they couldn't afford in real life, which is to watch what is provided in musical theaters. He adapted many images from Hollywood and Broadway together, packaged them in movies along with a simple story, combining different genres, comedy, tragedy, class discourses, etc. So he was giving his audiences high dose of entertainment that's not much challenging their conventions. At the same time, he framed Layla Murad in a very stunning image that, again, he took from where Tugu Mizrahi stopped and built on. To appreciate that, wish us luck. Let us see if we can watch a little bit of the same clip. love you. Who can compete with that? If you bear with me, actually, I would like you to visually just let yourself see what he was doing in this clip. This is from a different movie, Amber. What he was producing here, using Layla Murad's class training in classical genre to reproduce or remake Muhammad Osman's, one of the greatest of late 19th century vocalists, his muwashah, mal al-kasat. And the way that that muwashah was reformulated visually, and also the way how many instruments you can hear at the same time. For me, it is incredibly stunning. This is absolutely my favorite piece, although I apologize in advance that the quality of the clip is not very high here. She says, "Ah, ya mulimi," and my heart melts. Okay, now the sad part of their marriage. So that stunning professional success was only one side of their life together, but actually they had very, very difficult marriage. And this would take us to the point of interfaith marriage, an issue that actually escaped the historiography of modern Egypt. Okay. Modern state insisted to be in bed with the couple. Modern state regulated the marriage institution heavily. So until early 20th century, when you look at a marriage contract, and marriage in Islam is contract, it was drafted for each case to reflect whatever the couple agreed on. And usually this gave an opportunity to women to put their demands or their conditions, particularly if those women enjoyed status or power or family status, etc. So each marriage contract until early 20th century was very much customized for that agreement. But the state now, increasing its power over the society, made the marriage contract a pre-prepared printed form. So all what the ma'zoon, the guy who was doing the marriage, filling it, would just put the information for the couple. So this kind of sort of undermined women's opportunity to put their condition, but it didn't cancel it. If a woman was aware, if she insists, she could. But actually, when I look at the marriage contract, the form that Layla Murad signed, this is her marriage contract, is different from the form that was prepared for Muslim couples. This is a particular form prepared for interfaith, meaning when the husband is Muslim and the wife is non-Muslim. The main difference between that form and the regular marriage contract form is the contract here adds certain conditions and gets the wife to sign that she learned about it and she accepted them. And these conditions basically to make sure that any dispute between the couple in the future would be solved to give superiority to the Muslim husband. There is no room to negotiate over these. These conditions where the husband has the right to get married up to 4 wives without getting back to the original wife or the first wife. They are not going to inherit from one another. The children will follow, the religion would follow the husband. She won't leave the house, etc., without her husband's permission, and so on and so forth. These conditions actually are the extreme patriarchal interpretation of the Islamic Sharia. It is not the only interpretation of the Islamic Sharia. Don't mention that having it in the contract didn't give a room for any negotiation to add to that contract. I wonder why Layla Murad really, when that point in her life, she was a successful professional, celebrity, famous, would sign such a document. I think she rushed to it. And love makes us blind very often. Any lawyer, if she had a chance actually to talk to a lawyer, he would have advised her or made her know that the Hanafi law school that Egypt follow would have allowed her actually dispute against this. More importantly, when you read the witnesses who signed that contract, you find no one from Layla Murad's side signed. And this is really strange. Layla Murad represented herself in that contract, which is the opposite of the norm. The Egyptian norm that the first marriage, usually the wife would be represented by a male guardian, the father, the uncle, the older brother, etc. And also both witnesses are Muslim men. And the Hanafi school that Egypt follow still allows actually when the wife is non-Muslim to have non-Muslim witnesses. So my best guessing that Layla rushed with that marriage, probably Anwar Waqdi hadn't known either that this is the document they're going to sign. They just went to the court, said this is interfaith marriage, and give them the form. And probably none of her siblings or her father learned about it or even was present signing that document. Having their disputes always in public, inviting the press as a party in the relationship made it even worse over time, and the disputes never ceased. It is enough to say right now, actually, that between 1945, when they got married, until 1952, when they got divorced and remarried 3 times. So 1952 was the 3rd and final divorce. Yeah, it was heartbreaking, huh? It was love. But also, it was not always blind, madly love. We are talking about people who are professionally oriented, highly educated, and they know what they are doing. And this is what takes me to the question of her conversion to Islam. Okay. We have 3 things when, or I think of 3 different things when it comes to conversion. When you convert from a religion to another, you are simply changing your relationship with God. It's a private relationship. When you stop believing, okay, you don't care, God, no or not. When you think of God in a different way between you and God, you don't need probably to do anything different. So according to Layla Murad, she did that in 1946. And she said she kept it private because her father was terminally ill and old, and she didn't want to hurt his feeling. We take it. My question is not she converted or not. My question is, didn't she believe in Islam and wanted to be a Muslim or not? It is not my question. My question is what she did in certain procedures, in certain contexts, and what it meant. So actually, when we go to, this is an image that was highly publicized, 1948, during the war in Palestine, when she announced her conversion to Islam. So here, she's changing her relationship with the Egyptian society. She was saying, I'm Muslim. And it's not actually, it's impossible to argue that this was coincidence. Definitely, she wanted to change her relationship with the society. But 1947, actually, this is when she documented her conversion. And this was 1947, before the war. And this, when you register your conversion, you are changing your relationship with the state. This is what I want to say. So she could have converted without registering, announcing or not announcing, but to register in 1947, actually, and this is my argument, is not about what was going on in Palestine. It is mostly about her private relationship with her Muslim husband. financial dispute was going on, and documenting her conversion to Islam would change the conditions of the marriage itself. They will become on equal footing before the law as Muslim. Not really equal, I'm sorry, it's still, we're talking about patriarchal marriage institution, but her burden wouldn't be double-fold, wouldn't be a woman and a minority woman. I am giving this timeline actually probably because I'm still in the mood of teaching. I taught my last class yesterday. But I know actually from the fantastic revision that Deborah did for, usually she pointed at people get lost here, make sure the chronology is clear. So I'm trying to do it now. 1952, summer 1952 is definitely was the most eventful summer in modern Egyptian history. It was not as bloody as summer 2013, but definitely was very eventful. So we had Layla Murad and Anwar Wagdi got their third divorce in June. Anwar Wagdi got very sick. He had to go to Europe, to Paris for medication. We have the free officers coup turned into a revolution, July. And in August, Layla Murad actually would leave Cairo, go join Anwar Wagdi in Paris to be with him, despite their divorce. Love. And while they were there, the news broke out in September that Syria banned and blacklisted Layla Murad's work for allegation that she donated and visited Israel. That was a very strong blow on her career, definitely at the time. It is enough to say that the couple stayed in Europe being so scared to come back to Egypt until Egyptian authorities actually cleared them. The Syrians never actually produced one single evidence, one shred of an evidence to say Layla Murad had any connection of any sort with Israel at any moment. And this, the case of Layla Murad banning her or boycotting her, I think it's a good chance to start documenting the Arab boycott of Israel and the politics of that. By no means, and actually for transparency, definitely I support such boycott. And I would say the study now, the history of the boycott of Israel, is more important to do it now, since now we have the Arab regimes, one after another, is actually dropping the boycott without caring about any solution whatsoever for the Palestinian ordeal. So, at the time, this accusation was very strong, was very hurtful and harmful, but the Syrians did not bother to produce any evidence, knowing what it meant actually to accuse an Arab of that. And my argument is that Arab regimes, particularly the Syrian regimes, used the boycott decisions against certain individuals, particularly Arab individuals, as a way to empower themselves regionally, to generate kind of sort of power and honor, using and abusing the Palestinian cause without actually doing even the work or question if this going to benefit Palestinians, hurt Palestinians. Nothing happened of that. What to do if actually you unjustifiably accuse an Arab of violating the boycott? Do you apologize? Never. The Syrians never apologized either. And at the same time, they never tried to convince other Arab regimes to follow suit. So the Syrian boycott of Layla Murad was never investigated in the Syrian side. And actually, we can also understand Syria was never, during these years, the regimes were never stable enough to care about what they are doing towards individual Arabs. Layla Murad and Anwar Wagdi produced every evidence that the Syrians asked for. And they tried very hard. They sent the manager of the company, and later, actually, Anwar Wagdi would go to Damascus himself, but the Syrians will never investigate will never acknowledge that there was a mistake happening. Once the couple actually were cleared by the Egyptian authorities, the new regime actually did investigation, and they said it didn't happen. Layla Murad did not visit Israel. Layla Murad did not donate to Israel. This is only the time that the couple came back in November. They came back actually to pretend that they were a couple still. Even while some people would say there is a serious negotiation to remarry one another again, but of course, after third divorce in Islam, there's something that's called muhallil. The wife or the divorced wife could not remarry her ex-husband unless she gets married to another man, and constantly that marriage would dissolve either by divorce or that new husband would die. That we call it muhallil. However, like Orthodox way, you don't do it, you don't manufacture that second marriage for that purpose. But socially, it happens. It's kind of sort of people accommodate. Yeah, they got divorced 3 times, but they hire the man to marry her for one night and they divorce him. So it seems like this kind of negotiation was going on. And even in the public, they would say, Layla Murad herself would say, the third divorce didn't happen. It was a mistake from Ma'zoon. I didn't tell him. And what makes it even funny that actually the press covered her with pictures signing the third divorce in the office of her own lawyer. So she was very smart actually with the third divorce. She used the lawyer. So they had a public campaign to rehabilitate their image. Many statements by the couple showing how not only how they are together and loving, but how Layla Murad is a sincere Muslim, a sincere Arab, and all her commitment to the Arab causes, and she has nothing to do with Israel. And she said, actually, these rumors, it's not only vicious and didn't happen, but also unrealistic. Why I'm going to donate more than I ever made in my life to a state that I had no connection with. So probably here was the beginning of this discourse that if you want to be Egyptian, you should be a Muslim. A question that was not spoken in what we call it the liberal era in the Egyptian history. Layla Murad was integrated strongly and forcefully with the new regime, the free officers regime. She donated money to the Egyptian army. She was allowed to visit Egyptian soldiers in their barracks. She performed Nasheed al-Tahrir, or the anthem of the revolution that became actually the national anthem for some times. And she participated in army-sponsored initiatives called Train of Mercy to collect donations from every village by using artists to perform everywhere to collect these donations, and supposedly the donation will end up in Gaza, to Gaza. Until now, actually, we don't know how much money was raised during these trips. People donated generously, probably by choice or coercively. That was an army-sponsored event. We don't have track. And the press coverage showing the enthusiasm of artists who participated and people who donated in a way that actually seemed to be very chaotic. It's almost impossible to know how much was donated and what's done with this money. But this is not our question now. Our question is, Layla Murad became the voice and the image of the 1952 the free officers regime. And seemingly, she became strong enough and independent enough that she didn't need Anwar Waqdi anymore. Unilaterally, she made statements that she will never, ever go back to Anwar Waqdi. It is done. It's a phase in her life that's closed. Anwar Waqdi would make statements that initially would say it's offensive, and then I would sue the reporters who published that. He never did. Actually, he became so scared to make any comment beyond showing himself as a heartbroken man. The reason was Layla Murad very much started her new romance with one of the free officers. So she got so close to the free officers to the extent that she got pregnant with one of them. And, this is the free officer, Wagih Abaza. And this is the only image that actually was published for them, Layla Murad and Wagih Abaza, was published once, was never allowed to be repeated, and no other images for the couple together. They had a form of informal marriage. Rumors were everywhere about this relationship. When she got pregnant, simply he abandoned her. And this actually will give us a window to discuss the free officers through the lens of masculinity. We study their politics, their economic policies, their nationalism, their screw-ups, which never ended. But I think it's also important to study them as individual and group of young men who had certain notion and practices around masculinity. This kind of sort of relationship between Layla Murad and Wagih Abaza was not the only one. And of course, this kind of sort of history, maybe the historians would be scared or worried to run the risk of writing scandalous or something. But I believe that to understand the free officers regime can't be done well and completely without understanding the gender of those young men. Overnight, those young men became the most powerful individuals in the country, and some of them used that power to have affairs with celebrity women. I'm not saying women were victims always for these cases. Actually, many women consciously choose their protection through these relationships. So you have many informal marriages, affairs, only one case that turned into formal marriage, actually. Even Abdul Hakim Amir, the second man after Nasser, got married informally with an actress named Berlanti Abdul Hamid. If you think about making any study about soft porno in Egyptian history, go to Berlanti Abdul Hamid. But definitely nobody suffered as much as actually Layla Murad from this kind of relationships. I'm not claiming that she never loved the guy. He was handsome, he was young, he's much younger than Anwar Wagdi, and he's powerful. So probably she fell in love with him, don't mention her needs of his protection. But my argument actually that this is the relationship that was detrimental to her career. The masculinity among, as much as I see it through the lens of this relationship among the free officers, for them it felt good, and it's so good and powerful to show your colleagues that you are virile, you are attractive, and those celebrity and princesses are after you. At the same time, when it comes to having a second wife, I'm from Texas, bless you. When you have a second wife, this is something frowned upon. As modern men, polygamy in marriage is not acceptable. It doesn't make you look good. Because simply, Wagih Abaza could have married Layla Murad while she was pregnant and make sure that that child would be recognized like any other child. But he actually couldn't do that. Being modern, didn't want to be like polygamous. And more importantly for his case, his first wife actually is his cousin. Don't freak out. In Egypt, it's okay. Particularly for rich family and land-owning family like his. Land-owning families, they like their daughters and boys actually to intermarry like cousins and to make sure that the land is not going to be divided. So he couldn't afford to upset his first wife. Otherwise, he would be upsetting his entire family. And it was the easiest for him, actually, to abandon Layla Murad. The rumors, even in the press that was heavily censored and controlled about this relationship was leaking out. The intelligence of the free officers were investigating. And actually, this investigation is mostly because they were using one another's scandal against one another in their own internal conflict. And definitely this type of relationships upset some of them, including Nasser. Nasser's we call everybody has his own opium. Nasser's opium was not women. Nasser's opium was power. And he was so worried, actually, how the public would look at his men as like just involving in all these sexual scandals. Here, Layla Murad actually, few weeks after she gave birth to her son, Ashraf Abaza, who was not known to be Ashraf Abaza's son, Wagih Abaza's son. She was spending time away from the public gaze on the beach, but the press was after her, and she said, no, I didn't get married, I didn't give birth. That was, when we study this kind of history, it is really important to acknowledge the emotions of individuals and groups in certain time. I'm sure that studying emotions of Egyptians during Sisi's time for future historian, that would be like, nobody can escape it. But I think also we can do it in earlier phases. A mother giving birth, denying that she became a mother, while she a few weeks after giving birth. She was so scared. It doesn't mean she was helpless. She actually tried her best. And here in 1954, when Nasser celebrated the evacuation agreement with the British and threw a huge party, Layla Murad was chosen to perform, and that which indicates actually that Layla Murad mobilized some connections to be in that concert. Wagih Abaza did not attend. And Wagih Abaza's position was very much actually throwing these parties. This is his job, the PR person. But he was not in that concert. And she performed the most weeping and heartbreaking songs. And the message reached Nasser. Most evidence indicates that he started to put pressure on Wagih Abaza. Wagih Abaza was upset. He went back to his village in Sharqiya until the regime actually needed him to go back. And seemingly there was kind of sort of compromise. You are going to recognize Layla Murad's son, even if you don't put Wagih. So Ashraf Abaza would be known as Ashraf Abaza, or Ashraf Muhammad Abaza, not Ashraf Muhammad Wagih Abaza. To kind of sort of escape that, which one of the Abaza, there are many Abaza's families. And Layla Murad actually learned the lesson very harshly to shut up and don't talk about it. And she actually hid her son, not for 1 year, she hid him for very long. She rushed to a second marriage. She gave birth to Ashraf in July. By November same year, she got married. Her third husband, filmmaker Fatin Abdul Wahab, and she gave birth to her second child by December 1955. And while she was pregnant with her second child, actually she was arrested for gambling, illegal gambling. Gambling in Egypt is illegal, but actually the law does not criminalize the players. The law criminalizes the person who hosts the game. And the game, Layla Murad liked to play cards, and that was not a secret. Many celebrities actually, like Farid al-Atrash. So they know who's playing what, where, with who. That was not secret. But when she was arrested, it was actually an upper scale villa in a quiet neighborhood. All the players were women, so nothing actually to indicate anything disturbing that would justify the police to break into that private home and arrest everybody and bring the press to have heavy coverage. Even Al-Ahram, that is known to be conservative, pays less attention to crime news, particularly this kind of sort of scandals. It was daily coverage in the front page in Al-Ahram. Layla Murad in the gambling den. Of course, that was a harsh lesson to Layla, that there are arms in the state. Even if you reach the ears of Nasser, there are arms that actually can come after you. Of course, the case dropped. Nobody was charged in the trial, even the owner of the villa, the woman who owned the villa, but the damage already happened to Layla Murad's reputation. Probably the first time to acknowledge her son, she was known to be Zaki, or Zaki's mother, and Zaki, who was her second child. Actually, when she was celebrating the birth of Zaki, nobody talked about that she is having another son. In early 60s, actually, there's kind of sort of celebrity kids competition. Her son, Ashraf, won, and he became Ashraf, Layla Murad's son. This is Wagih Abaza with his extended family, or he liked to play the family man, as it should be. And Wagih Abaza would have always powerful positions in the state of Egypt under Nasser, and even al-Infitah under Sadat. He would become the tycoon of the car dealership. And the family is still strong, highly rich and powerful. And until today, actually, when both Layla Murad and Wagih Abaza died, coincidentally, the same year, this is the time that Ashraf became known to be Ashraf Wagih Abaza. Still, I searched the obituary pages in Al-Ahram, follow all the Abaza family's death. He was never mentioned. And I always think of you. Yeah, following this kind of sort of sad news, it really requires skills. So until today, actually, Ashraf Abaza was never mentioned in any obituary of the Abaza's family. Not his uncle, not his father, not his cousins. So Layla Murad survived the rumor crisis about the Syrian ban. She produced her own movie celebrating how the Egyptian army is defending Palestine, and how her character in that movie was a nurse sacrificing for those men in uniform. She continued her presence until mid-50s, mid-1950s, and things very much built up in a way that brought her to the breakdown. So we had the residue of the crisis. We had, most importantly, actually, the mental and the emotional pain that she went through around her relationship with Wagih Abaza and the second child. Then you have 1956 war. And this is an important question, actually, for the Egyptian society when they talk about Layla Murad. Layla Murad now is Muslim. So somehow you strip her out of her Jewishness, meaning 1956, when now the state and the society were adopting systematic policies to purge Egyptian Jews and to evacuate them, Layla Murad's network with her family, with her friends, many of them were Jews. So this added up to her pain and anxiety and uncertainty. Some of her siblings actually left the country, and she didn't know if they would come back. Many of her friends the same. So she definitely came to that mental health crisis that kept her in and out of mental health institutions until early 1960s, that she started to say, no, I'm back. I gained some weight because I was taking care of my children, but now I'm back and I'm ready. And actually, the Egyptian press always supported her and celebrated her potential return. She was back singing, that's true, but she was never back to cinema. And that actually would give us a window also to study the Nasserist state. Usually we tend to think of this form of authoritarian state as there is kind of sort of central power controlling everything, which I argue through the case of Layla Murad, it's not true. The Egyptian radio actually kept honoring Layla Murad through contracts of the exceptional performers, not the first tier, exceptional. At the same time, the Egyptian cinema, controlled by the state, is not giving her a chance. And here we can talk about the patronage networks. The guy who controlled the Egyptian cinema institution, that the state's company, was very much a patron of Wagih Abaza. So this is not a central decision to marginalize Layla Murad or to cancel Layla Murad from the cinema scene, but actually it is a patron who is serving his client. At the same time, all the schedules of the Egyptian radio networks actually shows that Layla Murad songs were broadcasted in every network more than once a day. This is not Layla Murad, definitely, but this is when al-Kawakib, the celebrity magazine, was celebrating Layla Murad's back. Layla Murad, actually, during that period, while she was really desperate to appear in cinema again, she tried very hard. She made different offers, but also her offers shows that her dignity as a performer. Like, this is the Egyptian TV now, is attracting audiences. She's willing to appear performing, but not in a cheap production. She would offer to produce her, to give fund to produce her movies. She would offer to say, okay, pay me fairly and I don't care, but bring composers and lyric writers who are up to me. There was actually block in her way until Sadat visited Jerusalem. And at that time, we find many state institutions actually inviting Layla Murad back to the stage and backing her strongly. She was handed a medal, 1977, and also there was a big celebration of the Egyptian cinema, history of Egyptian cinema, that handed medals to many Jewish artists, including Togo Mizrahi. And actually, this is the time that Egyptian TV started to broadcast Layla Murad's movies with Togo Mizrahi. And many other Jews who contributed to the Egyptian cinema and music will be celebrated through different types of coverages and concerts. And this is actually when I start to see the state is very much reminding Egyptians that there were Egyptian Jews here. So to have peace with Israel, the Jewish state might work or should work, because actually, don't you remember that we have Jews here? So that was, in my argument, this is very much that that state was doing, and doing it after. However, people who opposed the peace agreement with Israel, particularly opposed normalizing relationship with Israel before having comprehensive peace for Palestinians, they also did the same. They invited Layla Murad to say, Layla Murad is a good case. This is a Jewish woman who became Muslim and who became truly Egyptian because she boycotted Israel. She never opened any doors to have relationships with Israel. Layla Murad is the model to boycott Israel. And from here, we find actually the story of Layla Murad becomes a celebrity case, produced and reproduced in so many books, so many reports, so many press coverages, and always emphasizing on the question of her Jewishness, her Islam, her relationship with Israel. Even the coverage of her own, commemorating her death was not even kind enough to avoid such critical issues. So what I'm calling the productive line of Layla Murad's story around these questions, nobody actually would argue that Layla Murad was not a truly Muslim, or Layla Murad was Jewish, or deny that Layla Murad was Jewish. But actually, Egyptians were trying to tell themselves that we are here registering victory over Israel, and Layla Murad is ours. Layla Murad chose us. She chose to be Muslim. She chose to be Egyptian, and she rejected Israel. So, and reappropriating of Layla Murad would continue for different competing agendas among different political factions on the Egyptian political spectrum, from Sheikh Sha'rawi to actually Hanan Mufid, the author of one of those 4 books. I have to mention that this is the first book appeared during Layla Murad's life in mid-1970s and avoided the entire issue about her conversion, about Israel scandal, any of that. She was still alive, and obviously the author honored her wish. But books started after that, like here, this is a book that appeared in early 1990s, which also on the backdrop of Oslo. Signing Oslo Accord with the Palestinian, with some Egyptian figures, particularly those who are historically staunch advocates for boycotting Israel until the Palestinian rights achieved or attained complete, start to talk about normalizing relationships with Israel. And this actually, in my view, triggered that intensive discourse about how being a good Egyptian means to be a good Muslim, means to boycott Israel until actually why these boycott policies were there to act. So emphasizing her Islam would actually appears here in this book, Hanan Mufid. She's the daughter of Mufid Fawzi. Maybe some of you know him as Mustafid Fawri. Anyway, so she would end up the book holding the Quran, visiting Layla Murad's graveyard, and reading the Quran for Layla Murad's soul. Hanan Mufid is Christian. So and it is the same thing that celebrity preacher Sheikh al-Sha'rawi would be credited for how he played a big role in teaching Layla Murad the good rules of Islam. And he was also credited for bringing many Egyptian celebrity women to wear hijab and give up their acting career. Here, this is the cover of the image of one of the books about this issue, and this is Layla Murad. Even Hassan al-Banna's followers, Muslim Brotherhood, actually, they dared to claim that Hassan al-Banna was behind Layla Murad's conversion in 1940s. These images, when Layla Murad, these are, in my view, definitely these are staged images that publicized Layla Murad's conversion in 1948. When actually I got an access to a copy of this magazine in early 2004 or so, I felt like I was a hero. I got something very rare. But now actually it's all over the web. All the Egyptian, particularly social media, they are circulating these images, and in my view, they very much making the same argument: to be a good Egyptian, to be a Muslim, to be a Muslim, to be Egyptian. And here, if we think about ethnicity as a process rather than a thing by itself, I note that there is kind of sort of ethnitization of being Egyptian, which a question that was not rationally thought of. But equating being Egyptian with being Muslim, even coming from a Coptic young woman, Hanan Mufid, that's something that I think worth further negotiation and further investigation. The Sisi regime was also reappropriating Layla Murad. Now we are discovering a great deal of her songs that was censored by Sadat, not because she was Layla Murad. He was censoring all songs about Nasser's era. So this is one of the songs that was rediscovered recently. And she was singing to the Egyptian army after 1967 defeat. So she was telling the Egyptian army, we are with you. We actually sacrifice for you. You are our brothers and our cousins, etc. And under Sisi, the same song actually that was rediscovered was used as kind of sort of celebrating the Egyptian army who are in a fight with the jihadist groups in Sinai. More than that, some publications coming from the Egyptian state actually changed the lyrics of the word of the song, claiming that Layla Murad, instead of saying Palestine Arabiya, like Palestine will be back for Arabs, they claim Layla Murad said will defeat al-Irhabiyya. Al-Irhabiyya is a term that's used for Muslim Brotherhood since they were ousted in 2013. So nobody actually shies away from using Layla Murad for their own competing agenda. So they are not very much telling Layla Murad's stories as much as they are telling their own stories and their own propaganda. Fair enough. Okay, I'm concluding the book actually with an attempt to do two things at the same time: to honor Layla Murad's legacy and also kind of sort of babysit myself, saying the Egyptian society didn't screw up that bad. So I am raising that question, can an Egyptian be a Jew and a single mother? And this definitely for further research, why Jews actually, or evacuating Jews, that moment of late 1950s, following 1956, why this evacuating Jews from Egypt slipped from the intellectual cracks. People didn't reflect on it. And again, this is kind of form of emotional history, but I quote that the old burden of raising this question and making the statement fell on one single activist, as far as I know, single activist and intellectual, who's himself a Jew. Shahata Harun, the father of Magda Harun, the head of the Egyptian Jewish community now, who insisted to the very end that there is no contradiction between being a Jew and Egyptians. And he insisted not to drop his Egyptian citizenship, even when actually cost him the life of his own daughter. I'm always wondering why Egyptian secular intellectuals never really, why it slipped out of their intellectual reasoning, what was going on. They noticed it. I know that at least one author that I worked on, Ihsan Abdel Quddus, the most one actually who talks about Jews, but he expressed, in my view, the pain of their own personal experiences with some individual colleagues, neighbors, co-workers, who, from their view, betrayed them and became Zionist and left to Israel. And with this highly nationalist ethos of 1950s and 1960s to prove like kind of sort of nationalist puritanical attitude, it was very easy for them. This is my initial conclusion. It was easy for them to actually not to give any, to express any concern about individual Egyptian Jews or families who were evacuated unjustifiably. The second question, can an Egyptian be a single mother? And I am drawing on celebrity experiences, starting with Huda Hanim Sha'arawi, the grandeur Egyptian feminist, who actually, her son got married informally with an Egyptian singer of the time and had a child with her. And then he denied that marriage, and his mother, Huda Hanim Sha'arawi, supported him. And Fatma Sirri, the wife, dared to go to the court to prove her daughter's to be accepted as Muhammad Sha'arawi's daughter. She won the case, but Huda Hanim Sha'arawi went to the extreme and made a case that, okay, she's our daughter and you are not qualified to be her mother. So she prevented the mother from seeing her child the rest of her life. I'm sure Layla Murad was aware of the case, and this is probably why she never really took the case to the court, or one of the reasons. But here the part that I'm saying, I'm trying to be kind to myself or kind of sort of babysit myself. I trace some kind of change in the Egyptian public attitude towards children born through informal marriage. They were all celebrity cases since 2004 until today. And we find shift, like it's slow, but it is noticeable. From a case to another, people are getting more and more to sympathize with mother. And even there is now a campaign asking for a fair family law that gives mothers right to register the birth of their children without permission of the father. Stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hanan. We have time for questions. I see that. I thought you were going to the mic.
This is taking me back to old school, past the microphone. Is it on? Yeah. Thanks for a great presentation. I wanted to ask you the most exciting question about archives and how you went about reconstructing this story, considering it seems that once there's a plethora of information and misinformation out there, a self-interested press attempts to tell this story. What did you use as your archival base? How did you navigate rumor, myth, and those sort of things? And thank you again.
Thank you. It's an important question, actually. It's a key question for the entire project. I utilized the press as actually a most important source in the story. And I tried to do two things at the same time. To try to verify every information possible and acknowledge the gap of information that I couldn't verify. At the same time, I'm using the press coverage as a discourse about social issues. And this is why Layla Murad's life entirely is a window to write a different history or to provide a different narrative on the history of Egypt, where issues like single motherhood, masculinity of certain people in power, about interfaith marriage, should be centralized in the historiography. Getting the material was very difficult, and this was really a surprise for me. I thought and probably Deborah faced similar issues. I thought, like, it is fun. I'm going to read these gossip publications. I always like gossip publications. But I couldn't find these publications because I wanted to verify everything and to construct step by step. So that took me quite a bit of work in addition to the question of methodology, how I'm going to use them. Simply because archives don't acknowledge this material as worth collecting.
Hanan, thank you very much. It was fascinating. I wanted to ask about the reception of your work in Egypt, since it seems like such a courageous project and very kind of unusual and breakthrough kind of thing. So I would be curious to hear a little bit about this, if you can share. I mean, I know that the book was just published, but I guess that this is something that you've already published on and
Are we online?
Sorry?
Are we online?
Sorry, if this is embarrassing, then...
If you want to keep it to dinner.
No, I would say Rabbina Yustur. Yani. So far, Rabbina Yustur. People haven't read the book, and I hope that they won't read it. Although as much as I hope that they read it. But yeah, I don't deny that. There are certain sections of the book that concerns me. Not the public perception. I'm going to stand to everything. But considering that the Abaza family, with all the resources they have, they can do a lot. Yeah. Rabbina Yustur.
Thank you for your amazing presentation. I really was just fascinated from start to finish. I wanted to ask whether you managed to connect with any of her Jewish family members, whether in Israel or elsewhere in the Egyptian Jewish diaspora, to get a sense of sort of what kind of stories or narratives do they tell about her and her life?
I tried very hard, but actually the only relative I got in touch with was Eyal Bizawi, who also working on similar issues. He's a colleague, and he relates to her family. So I tried very hard to reach out to her sons. Her younger son actually just passed away, unfortunately, and untimely. Once he heard that, he would say, yeah, he was kind of, he's a filmmaker, actor. He didn't do much, actually, until he accepted the fact that he's a son of Layla Murad and people want to talk with him about his mother. But every time since 2004, actually, I would call him. He would be excited, and then once he knows that I was interested in his mother, he would shut down. Her other brother, Ashraf, who's very proud to be Layla Murad's son, and he talks about her endlessly to the press. He refused many times to talk to me. I communicated with him through the admin of the Facebook group, Layla Murad, but he didn't, and I didn't have another way, actually, to enforce him to talk to me. And this is, like, particularly when I was phrasing certain, how to call the relationship with Abaza, it always burdened me actually ethically, because that's a question that relates to particularly Ashraf's feeling towards like his mother. I mean, yeah, I really wished that he talked to me and he helped me to choose a phrase to describe his mother's relationship with Wagih Abaza. That didn't happen.
Can I ask questions since I have the microphone?
You see now?
What? What? So actually, I want to go back to the image, Hanan, that you showed us about the Kulthum and the headline about Layla Murad. I read in the book that I think was it Ashraf Zaki about the Watha'iq al-Khassa, the private documents of Layla Murad, and he's talking about the tension between Kulthum and Layla Murad in the book, and I wonder whether I read in that book that she had a good relationship with Naguib, and after Naguib was ousted by Gamal Abdel Nasser, she was sidelined just like Naguib, and Kulthum stepped in to fill the void that Layla Murad actually left. Do you agree with that, or does the marginalized? But you seem that you're suggesting that Layla Murad, she's still active, she's still received or welcomed in the radio, but maybe because of the power that Wagih Abaza had, she wasn't able to do much. And I wonder whether marginalizing Layla Murad had something to do with the relationship between the tension between Wagih Abaza and Layla Murad, and Gamal Abdel Nasser himself wanted to distance himself from these scandals. So we know about Berlanti Abdel Hamid and the encounter between Gamal Abdel Nasser and Mushir Abdel Hakim Amir and Berlanti Abdel Hamid. So was she sidelined because of that relationship, and Kulthum stepped in?
Thank you. Ashraf Gharib's book, actually, I consider it the best book appeared on Layla Murad in Arabic. He made a great effort actually to document some of the press coverage on her, rather than kind of sort of replicating what was written before. But his attitude and his analysis is very much replicating what's mentioned before. And I met Ustaz Ashraf, and he was really generous, Ashraf Gharib, to discuss many issues. No, I disagree with his analysis. There is no evidence that when Nasser ousted Naguib, he cleansed or cleaned. Definitely there was kind of sort of censorship that is tradition since Hatshepsut, like you remove the name of the previous ruler from the cartouche. So this is why Layla Murad's song, Ala Allah al-Qawi al-I'timad, which became the anthem under Naguib, disappeared. And then Sadat did the same too for Nasser's songs. But I disagree. Because it was not Layla Murad alone who actually sided with Naguib. I mean, Naguib was the face of the revolution for the Egyptian public. And artists and others, they saw in Muhammad Naguib the image. So what Layla Murad did was not exceptional, that would require or energize any particular retaliation from Nasser. But I think it is his relationship with Wagih Abaza that really hurt her. Kulthum, I don't know exactly if she did any. I really doubt, because Kulthum, even before 52, she was the singer of the East. So she didn't need to fight Sabah or Shadia or Layla Murad. But Kulthum was really unfair in the way that she mobilized the Egyptian state before 1952 against singers and entertainers coming from Arab countries. She, not as a singer, but as actually the head of the trade union of musicians and singers. To the extent that Noor al-Huda, the Lebanese singer and actress, she came to attend the launch of her own film produced by Anwar Wagdi's company. And they kept her at the airport and shipped her back to Lebanon without entering. So I think Kulthum would be blamed about that. But how this relates to Layla Murad's story, I think this reckless rumor about Layla Murad's donation to Israel was amplified in Syria and Lebanon, very much because of the grudge that artists in Iraq and Lebanon and in Syria, they felt towards how they are treated in Egypt. They were mistreated in Egypt. So how the amplification of this reckless rumor, rather than actually saying it doesn't make sense, just move on, I think it has something to do with that grudge that Kulthum and others triggered against Arab performers. To add one thing, Layla Murad was against actually these policies from Kulthum, to be clear. She made many statements that said we should open our hearts and arms to colleagues coming from the Arab countries.
Okay, so I have many questions, but I'll stick to one. Coming from the Jewish Egyptian diaspora, there is a very strong claim in the Jewish diaspora about Layla and her Jewishness, quite like the mirror image, right, of the general Egyptian society about her conversion, right? That her conversion to Islam didn't matter. She's Jewish. She stayed Jewish. Everything is okay. Eyal is used to say that everybody in the Jewish community is a relative of Layla Murad. I'm actually surprised that he says that he actually is. And that goes on, and like the question in every, I saw an interview like a few months ago with Zaki before he died. Even now, 2021, like this discourse around her conversion, yes or no, is ongoing, like these different claims. And I wonder because you said that she was like, she had great agency in shaping her story the way she wanted in the press. Was she actually like behind this? Was she actually like playing with this? Because that goes to your final question, can an Egyptian be a Jew? Or can a Jew be an Egyptian? That she was actually directing and being like liminal in that sense.
Fair question. I don't have an answer for it. Okay. Traditionally, in Orthodox Islam, if someone says I'm Muslim, he's Muslim or she's Muslim. Because of that report that Hal shaqaqta qalbo, did you split his heart? So, and I think as a historian, I really can't raise that question because she said she converted to Islam. But as a historian, I would look at the circumstances she converted when she declared that conversion and when she documented that conversion. But she converted or not, that's only herself can answer. I don't think anyone else. There are some actually sources that I couldn't verify. They say towards the end of his life, she asked certain Jewish community members to attend certain holidays, and then she didn't show up. I couldn't verify, prove or disapprove this. However, it doesn't mean also for me that she's still Jewish or not, because this is could be nostalgia, simple. I still want to do what I did in Al-Eid, yani. So I don't want to read much into it. No, thank you. I think she's, if we read her statements and Anwar Wagdi's statements and the Egyptian press collectively statements about the crisis from the beginning, I think this is, I'm not blaming her, but this was the beginning of this kind of sort of speaking of the ethnicity of being Egyptian means Muslim. Because she actually tied them very strongly. She didn't say, so what? Or she didn't say, my family are still Jewish, or I still have Jewish family. Actually, she kept talking, no, I'm Muslim, I'm Arab, I can't be Muslim and Arab and with Israel at the same time. So that connection was made right away. We understand why she had to make it. However, I mean, usually people think of Anwar Wagdi as a boogeyman in her life. I disagree because of the research I did. Initially, I thought He manipulated her, he stole her money, etc. But actually, I think he was way more gentleman than she was, a gentlewoman in that dispute, particularly after his death. He untimely died in 1955. And she kind of sort of manipulated the narrative about their marriage. And this is when she said, since we got married, I wanted to convert, but he didn't want me. She was trashing him simply. And then she said, suddenly in 1948, he brought those photographers and he said, you have to convert, you have to take pictures, and he publicized. I believe he did that part. But like, I think when I read her conversion document, or registration of her conversion, Layla Murad, Anwar Ogdi is not mentioned anywhere. Actually, her witnesses were two men who were happened to be at the court. So I think probably she converted and she didn't even share it with him until 1948. And yeah, she trashed him quite a bit after he died. It's understandable. Even if she had that agency in ending the negotiation about resuming their marriage, everything in her life went to hell from then. While actually the Anwar Wagdi got married to his first love before Layla Murad, and then untimely died.
We have time for one last question.
And I get it. Thank you. That was quite fun, actually. And actually, a lot of my questions were already asked, but the Anwar Wagdi I wanted to stay on for a minute because you asked about their wedding contract, and you or I understood from you to suggest that you didn't know why she would sign it or not first go to a lawyer, or an assumption that a lawyer would absolutely tell her different rights and her family wasn't there. But you also said before that she was having to deny their relationship in the media at the same time. And I'm curious from you if it's possible that it was a rushed marriage because she was compromised, or because somebody knew something, or because of rumors, in the ways that she's controlling her image, and you're talking about what the press is holding her to as a woman at the time. Why I assume it would be obvious to you, so that if that's not what you're thinking about, there's a reason why not.
Okay, as a woman in this time, who wouldn't marry Anwar Wagdi? He was handsome, he was successful, he's funny, and he was making himself rich too. He was set for the path to be rich. She was like about 27 years old or so that's the time that. And something important about Layla Murad from the beginning, actually, as a teenage stepping into entertainment, she always wanted to keep the respectability of the middle class. She always, and she succeeded actually, to save herself from being sexualized. That could be a reason to rush the marriage. I think she was infatuated by him. It was real love from both. Why they hid it, and then the way that they announced it, actually, or publicized it in a very staged way. Both of them were students of Tugu Mizrahi. And Tugu Mizrahi was very well known how to increase the interest of the public to come watch movies without actually spending any money in advertisement, by fabricating scandals or making unbelievable news, etc. So when rumors about their infatuation, and then they got married, and then before they actually ended the shoot, Anwar Wagdi invited all the press. He insisted the entire cast would stay in the studio, and then he said, well, the picture that we just shot now about the marriage of the couple in the movie is actually real, because we got married a few days ago, and we are waiting for our apartment to be ready for us to move in. That's an interesting point, actually, to think about it, that I really doubt that she made a mistake. And she wanted to cover up through marriage. Okay, Lior, can I use my captive audience to share one last thing, just to make it less gloomy? Because Layla Murad, very much, she wanted her audience to be happy and enjoy. So give me 2 minutes in your time to share this final clip. It resonates with some of us who learn Arabic as native or half native or foreigners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are now going to Webster's. Michelle, are you going to lead the way, or? Yeah, follow Michelle.